Welcome back to the Growth Catalyst podcast. In this episode, I was joined by Cindy Gallop, who is CEO and founder of MakeLoveNotPorn. If you're not aware of Cindy's work, she is on a mission, a literal sexual revolution. We talk about how she's built a bold, values-led company. She shares the strategies that she's used to navigate the huge barriers that are there as a consequence of systemic discrimination. And she also shows us what it takes to lead real change when that system is completely stacked against you. Again, listening to this powerhouse, she is revolutionizing big tech industries with real purpose, and over the last 15 years has created a model starting with and continuing to support her own ideals. It's sharp, inspiring, and full of takeaways. Let's go. In today's episode of the Growth Catalyst, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Cindy Gallop to decided to join me and have a conversation with me. So welcome, Cindy.
Delighted to be here.
So Cindy is a powerhouse for all sorts of reasons, very much behind the founder of Make Love Not Porn. And I sat and listened to things that you had to say at Ideas Fest and talking about infrastructure and just changing the way that things have always been done. And I really wanted to dig into that conversation today. So it's fascinating sort of reading about you for those that might not have heard of you. So your LinkedIn profile says that you're the Michael Bay of business, and you like to blow shit up. But then there's an immediate contrast with the reality that you're trying to revolutionize stuff, and you've created this revolutionary platform with not many people, kind of on a shoestring over a large period of time, over the last 15 years. So you went from being the advertising woman of the year to saying, "Come on my face," a couple of times on the TED stage. So that's not a typical career transition. Can you give us some background and just just share with us the moment that you realized that pornography had become this default sex education for an entire generation?
Sure. So basically, Collette, everything in my life and career has happened by accident. I've never consciously, intentionally planned anything. My ex-boss in the advertising world at BBH, Sir John Hegarty, has this wonderful mantra: do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. And that's very much how I believe in living my life. So I date younger men, and I will just explain for our listeners' benefit, first of all, that I am someone who has never wanted to be married, never wanted children, adores being single, cannot wait to die alone, and dates younger men casually and recreationally. And I'm deliberately very public about all of that because we don't have enough role models in our society, for women and for men, by the way, that demonstrate you can live your life very differently to the way you're expected to and still be amazingly happy. And I wanted to have a speak on it. So I was dating younger men, 18, 19 years ago, which is what led me to realize through my direct personal experience that I was encountering what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized that I was experiencing very personally what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. It's when those two things converge that porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So, 18, 19 years ago, I was encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 18, 19 years ago, nobody was talking about this. No one was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So nearly 17 years ago now, I put up on no money a tiny, clunky website at MakeLoveNotPorn.com that in its original version was kind of a public service announcement. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. As you've mentioned, I launched Make Love Not Porn at the TED conference in 2009. My TED talk went viral, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out, and I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I then felt I had a personal responsibility to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And so that's when I turned it into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously, which is what we are today, the world's first and only user-generated, importantly 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We're a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we all have in the real world. We are socializing, normalizing, destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We're literally sex education through real world demonstration.
Yeah. And it's incredible. So I think some people would have sort of realized that they tapped into something. They might have written a blog post. You decided to go and build a platform and actually tackle this head on and tackle how the world is talking about sex. And that's so much to be admired in that. Was it your advertising brain, you think, that sort of happened and realised that this was a market opportunity? Obviously, the life that you were living, the lifestyle that you were living, this convergence of things that allowed you to happen upon the idea?
Well, and for our listeners' benefit, my background is 40 years working in brand building, marketing, and advertising, which I always say is very good experience for what I do now, because I've spent 40 years working in the business of getting people to do things that they originally had no intention of doing. And, in response to your question, Collette, I would say that, I designed my business, Make Love Not Porn, around all my own beliefs and philosophies. So there are a number of principles of approach that I believe in operating, which are absolutely applicable to pretty much any other industry and any other area anyone might be working in. I'm a great believer, and this absolutely comes out of my advertising days, in communication through demonstration. And what I mean by that is, don't say it, be it, do it, show it. And that's because that is the best way to get anybody to understand the importance of what you're doing at a visceral level and really take it on board. So with Make Love Not Porn, these days in the Me Too era, people are quite rightly, talking about consent, writing about consent, very much focused on consent. But here's the issue. Nobody knows what consent actually looks like in bed. Mm. The only way to educate people on what is great consentful communicative sex is by watching people actually having that kind of sex. And Make Love Not Porn is the only place on the internet where you can actually do that. Also, I'm a great believer that everything in life and business starts with you and your values. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And no one can ever answer me, because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. But they should, because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, trust, respect are as important as those values are in every other area of our lives where we're actively taught to exercise them. So yes, I designed Make Love Not Porn around all my own beliefs and values. And as I say, I talk about my particular approach to doing business because while I operate within very challenging parameters, I think there are lessons for other business leaders that can encourage them to take a different approach to their own challenges.
Yeah, I'd like to delve a little further into that in a moment, but I think you've been fighting this, or you've been sort of delivering on this purpose for at least 15 years, operating with less than a handful of employees, whilst watching billions flow to other platforms that you quite rightly, and I quite understand that you believe cause and do cause societal harm. What's the personal cost to you that's like the person that's championing this?
So I will just contextualize this for our listeners who should be aware that when I had the idea, when I launched Make Love Not Porn in its original public service announcement iteration, now nearly 17 years ago, and then decided to turn it into a business, I had no idea then that I and my tiny team would fight an enormous battle every single day, not even to grow Make Love Not Porn, just to keep it alive.
Yeah.
Basically because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup takes for granted, I can't, the small print always says no adult content. Yeah. And that is all pervasive across every area of the business, starting with the most important area, which is I can't raise funding. Yeah. If I'd been able to raise the funding I was looking for nearly 17 years ago now, for a business whose ultimate mission is to help end rape culture globally, we would not be in the scenario we are today, where the issue that I was the very first person to identify all those years ago is now worse than ever. It's not just the fact that it's challenging to find investors who get it to raise funding. I can't get banked. Earlier this year, Make Love Not Porn was debanked 3 times in 2 months. We are a completely legal business. 3 banks, one after the other, kicked us out. I'm happy to report that I found a 4th bank, so we are good for now. Every tech service you need to use to operate a video platform, hosting, encoding, encrypting, the terms of service always say no adult content. My 2 biggest pain points are payments, because PayPal, Stripe, etc., will not work with adult. I have to work with the murky subculture of adult-friendly payment processors who charge extortionate fees. And we are banned from advertising and promoting Make Love Not Porn anywhere. Yeah. And essentially, I've therefore spent the past 17 years advocating for how much the world would be changed if the world opened up to welcoming, supporting female founders like me, who are building world-changing businesses with the potential for massive societal impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's most fascinating about your story for me. So you're paying huge amounts in processing fees. So if I understand correctly, so as you've said, PayPal won't play, Amazon won't host you. Is that still correct?
Actually, they refused to host us. Back in the day. Now at least they are one company that changed their terms, and so we are hosted on AWS these days. Okay. But most other tech services continue to refuse to work with us, which is absolutely infuriating.
So what about the Facebooks and obviously I know how difficult it is within the Snapchat.
So we are banned from advertising on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Google, YouTube, Reddit. Look at what's on Reddit, I ask you. Reddit bans us from advertising. We are banned from advertising on Twitter X. Look at the content on Twitter and X. Twitter X, that's ridiculous. And it's especially frustrating because, for example, we are banned from doing paid search ads on Google. But every day, all around the world, people search for Make Love Not Porn without knowing that we exist. And what I mean by that is the top organic search terms that send traffic to us are make love, not porn, real sex, not porn, video sexo na porno, make love, not porn, where they don't know there's a company actually called that. One young man told me that he found us when he Googled porn that is not porn. He was desperate for something different, had no idea what to search for. And by the way, that one young man represents millions of young men. Fortunately, when you search porn that is not porn, you find make love, not porn. That is how much the world wants what we are. The documentary performance Hollywood movie knows it needs us. And by the way, the reason I say the most critical thing for us is funding is because actually all of those barriers fall when you can write big enough checks. If I could raise the kind of money I'm looking for, and if I could write Google, a check for millions of dollars, you bet I'd be able to do paid search.
Yeah, absolutely. So was there a lesson that you could sort of share with our listeners around, not about organic growth? So obviously you really have understood user intent, what people are looking for, and had to jump over buildings of hurdles that the venture companies, those that are backed by venture companies, have missed. Is there a lesson in there for leaders around how to go about revisiting and ripping up that playbook?
Well, there are two things that I've had to do coming out of this really appalling and unfair business situation. And by the way, I do just want to be very clear for our listeners. Our mission at Make Love Not Porn ultimately is to help end rape culture globally. That may sound like a very big mission, but we have 12 years of proof of concept at the micro level. We help end rape culture by doing something very simple nobody anywhere else on the internet is doing.
Yeah.
Which show you how wonderful great consensual communicative sex is in the real world. Our social sex videos role model good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And here's the important part. We make all of that aspirational versus what you see in porn and popular culture. One man left a comment saying, "This video makes me want to be a better man in the bedroom and in life." That's just one example of what we have been able to achieve. It is literally criminal that we cannot raise the funding we need. So, two strategies that I've undertaken. And, as I say, extrapolating these to general principles. The first principle I would urge the business leaders in our audience to take on board is the most important thing always, whatever you want to achieve, is to find the person who gets it. And what I mean by that is, I know that Make Love Not Porn investors around, and there are a ton of them. There may even hopefully be some listening to this podcast right now. They are impossible to find by the usual means because they all have one thing in common. Your willingness to fund Make Love Not Porn is entirely a function of your personal sexual journey. It's a function of your personal lens on sex and sexuality that's been shaped by your own experience of it. And I obviously have no way to research and target for that. Not least because sex is the area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. The people who look like they will totally get it don't. The people who look like complete prudes do. And so my strategy has to be, I put what I'm doing out there all the time, across all my social channels. I do every media interview I'm asked, I go on every podcast. I have to make synaptic connections happen with attract those investors to me. Now, this is obviously a long, slow, painful, and highly inefficient process, but every so often it works. And so, lesson number one for any business leader is put what you're doing out there in order to attract the people who get it to you, whether that is business partners, deal makers, acquirers, investors, customers, clients. The ability to connect with people who go, wow, I really get what this person is doing. I like it and I want some of that. That's once you find the people who get it, you can make amazing things happen. And then the second principle of approach is I'm a great believer that when you have a truly world-changing venture, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And so, I've talked about my infrastructure challenges. As far as I'm concerned, if the ecosystem that is meant to enable you to scale and thrive shuts you out, build your own ecosystem. And so I developed a product roadmap for MakeLoveNotPorn that is infrastructure based. At the heart of it is MakeLoveNotPorn itself, which is a sex tech platform, very challenging to raise funding for. And around it, I want to build an edtech product, a fintech product, an adtech product, and an AI product. The edtech product is what parents and teachers began begging me for from day one of MakeLoveNotPorn, which is the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education extension of what we do. So I had the idea 10 years ago for MakeLoveNotPorn.academy. 10 years ago, because it's literally, that is how long investors have been refusing to fund a badly needed sex education platform. And MakeLoveNotPorn.academy, listeners, if you go to that URL, you'll find more detail there. But this is an aggregator hub for the best of the world's sex education content that is currently being blocked, censored, and deplatformed everywhere. So our mission at MakeLoveNotPorn Academy is to organize the world's sex education information to make it universally accessible and useful. That is a deliberate paraphrase of Google's original mission statement: organize the world's information to make it universally accessible and useful, because today in this area, Google is not doing that. The algorithm is biased, it's censoring. Parents and teachers tell me all the time that when they search for the resources they need, they cannot find them. And so I was able to raise a small amount of equity crowdfunding last year. I'm currently running a bridge funding round on a safe note alongside that. And that's enabled us to design and build MakeLoveNotPorn Academy, which we hope to launch later on this fall, and which is designed, as I say, to aggregate the best of the world's sex education content so that everybody can see how critically important and enormously useful that is. And then, I'm being very pragmatic here. I want to be able to raise a serious round of funding once the Academy is out there and working, from edtech investors who can see the platform, with traction. Because the path to exit is very clear. When I prove it's possible to operate a dedicated sex education platform safely and securely, the Academy utilizes our 100% human curation model, humanize, vet everything, make sure it's safe, we endorse it. Then the game plan is that giant edtech company buys it from me for a vast amount of money. So that's the first product that we'll be launching later this year. The second product, also in progress, is a fintech product. Because I've said for years publicly, I want to build the Stripe of sex tech. The first payments app that welcomes legal, ethical, transparent ventures like mine cleans up. There is a huge financial opportunity in processing payments for restricted business, not just adult and sex tech, legal adult and sex tech, like my own business, but cannabis, psychedelics, crypto itself, large areas of business you would not think would be restricted, but are. Stripe just decided very recently that crowdfunding is a restricted area of business. They will not process payments for crowdfunding sites. That's a huge opportunity. So I have found a terrific partner to be able to build this on the blockchain with crypto. I'm calling my payments app BlockFree. We have a holding page up at blockfree.us. And again, the game plan is, when I prove I can take restricted business payments safely and securely, giant fintech company buys BlockFree for a huge amount of money. So I'm basically taking every business obstacle I encounter and turning each one into a massive money-making disruptive business opportunity itself. And by the way, further down the line, I have an ad tech product. Ad tech will enable brands to advertise who currently can't, like myself. And much further down the line, I have an AI product as well. But the principle coming out of that for business leaders is what about your own ecosystem is holding you back? What can you reinvent, about the infrastructure that you want to operate differently, that actually is building a solution to your own problem that many other people want to use, and therefore has the ability to make you a vast amount of money?
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. That's incredible. So you've basically taken systemic discrimination, turning it into competitive advantage, and building or digging a bunch of moats around you, because actually if some of these big boy tech companies did decide to turn inwards, they could, potentially really disrupt what you're doing. But actually, because you're literally blowing up each one of those infrastructures, you are putting yourself in a very safe position that really is aiming to fulfill that purpose that you set out to achieve.
Well, the interesting thing, Collette, is and again, I'm right down in the trenches, so this doesn't feel as celebratory as it might. But the one good thing about what I'm doing is that, I'm operating in a very high barrier to entry sector. Facebook is never, ever going to take my business away from me. Amazon isn't, Microsoft isn't. None of the tech giants are going to go into sex tech. Fact of life. I'm operating in one arena that nobody else is going to operate in, even though everybody knows the gigantic financial opportunity within it. And also, I think what's interesting too is with Block-Free, my payments and payouts app, and by the way, the idea is that they'll be able to take payments and make payouts, because we have all the same barriers with making payouts to our MakeLoveNotPorn contributors. We call our MakeLoveNotPorn stars. But the idea is to make it work exactly as we would like it to for MakeLoveNotPorn, in a way that is so seamless that actually everybody will want to use it, whether or not they have a restricted business. Because I'm looking at removing a ton of the barriers that many of the fintech apps out there put in place to protect themselves from not processing payments to do with sex. And so when you go, we are for any legal, ethical, and transparent business, no matter where you operate. And again, by the way, Block-Free operates our unique 100% human curation model, what I call the human curation layer on top of the internet. When I vet every applicant, make sure they are legal, ethical, and transparent. That's how we know we work with any dodgy business going on. Then actually, that's a whole new model of operating that, as I say, can attract many more users than purely restricted business users.
Yeah. Again, just that reflipping, that reframing of a very topical conversation. So just in terms of sort of maths. Now, I know Pornhub is not your competition, but it is a competition, because that's where the eyes end up, right? And that's obviously what you're trying to change. So how many members do you have now at MakeLoveNotPorn?
Sure. So again, for our listeners' benefit, bear in mind that, I have a business I cannot promote. I cannot do targeted marketing for. I cannot do paid for marketing. So our growth has been entirely organic. We have had, in the 12 now, actually 13 years we operate as a business, we've had, over 2.5 million people sign up in terms of ever sign up to MakeLoveNotPorn. We have in the region of 150,000 visitors each month. We have on our platform right now over 5,000 videos. We have 500 MakeLoveNotPorn stars. Those numbers fluctuate because people come and go. This is the real world. People break up. Take the videos down, etc. But what I think is really interesting, and the reason why, when I can raise the funding I'm looking for, I can really realize this huge business opportunity is the moment people find out about MakeLoveNotPorn, they want what we do. So to give you one example, I gave a keynote back in June at South by Southwest London, titled "How Sex Education Can Help End Gender Violence and Bring Back Love." And in the audience was a journalist from the biggest German language daily news publication in Switzerland, NZZ, which stands for Neue Zeitung, I can't remember the exact name. But anyway, she came up to me after and said, I'd love to interview you for NZZ. I went, sure. So we did the interview. They published it in July. The day that interview was published, Switzerland rocketed to be the fourth highest source of traffic to MakeLoveNotPorn. Our number one traffic source is always the US, which is our biggest market. It's the biggest market, followed by the UK, followed by Germany. Switzerland knocked Canada out of fourth place. And think about the relative sizes of those two markets. We saw a massive spike in traffic sign-ups revenue, because that's how much everybody in Switzerland, the moment they read about us in NZZ, raced to MakeLoveNotPorn. That gives you some idea. And as I said, tiny country, fourth highest source of traffic. That gives you some idea of, how appealing what we do is. And as I say, when I can raise serious funding, I can write big enough checks that I can absolutely make those barriers fall to be able to advertise and promote. Another thing that is a very interesting indicator of how we are at a zeitgeist moment of what I'm doing is, for years, parents have been buying their teenage children subscriptions to MakeLoveNotPorn because they tell us, and I quote, I want my kids to see what happy, healthy, loving sex relationships actually look like. In the past year, those messages from parents have become way more frequent and way more desperate. So mother wrote to us a few months ago and said, I've just discovered my 12-year-old son is watching Pornhub. I would much rather he watch MakeLoveNotPorn. I know he's underage. Can we find a workaround? Now, at MakeLoveNotPorn, we are more legal than legal. We are for 18 and over. We are age-gated. Ofcom have signed off on our adherence to the Online Safety Act. But our policy is parental judgment trumps that. As a parent, you know what is right for your child. As a parent, you are free to sign up to MakeLoveNotPorn as an adult, and you can then gift a subscription to anybody you want. So that parent, that mother, has now gifted a subscription to a 12-year-old son. Another mother wrote to us and said, I have 3 teenage sons. I want to give them all subscriptions. Do you have a family plan? And I said to my team, oh my God, we have to create a family plan, MakeLoveNotPorn. And in fact, as some of our listeners may or may not recall, earlier this year, The Times in the UK ran an article about the importance of talking to your kids openly and honestly about sex. And they interviewed a mother who said, she said, my 12-year-old son was about to go off to boarding school. I knew he'd grow up very quickly there. I bought him a subscription to MakeLoveNotPorn. She said she wanted to get out ahead of what he was going to encounter in the dorms. She said, MakeLoveNotPorn is a wonderful little island of good, healthy sex in a world that needs it so badly. I can tell you, 12 years ago, we would not have been getting those emails from parents. That's an indication of how clear-sighted parents are today about what their kids are encountering, and how willing they are to be open in understanding that we are the solution. And I think that augurs very well for our business potential.
Yeah, so you've created some incredible proof of concepts, right? Whether it's at a country level or on an individual parenting level. But how do we get those proof of concepts to scale? What's mainstream society going to be able to do to actually adopt this vision?
I mean, again, it's very simple, Collette. The only thing holding me back is lack of access to capital. I just need cold hard cash. And, as I say, I have sporadically found the investors who get it. I just need to find a lot more of them. And so that is my one constant daily goal, looking for the investors who get it to fund us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's imagine it's 2035 and this generation have managed to grow up with comprehensive sex education that has been driven by their own conversations, their own thoughts, their own views on intimacy. What does that world look like, and what's MakeLoveNotPorn done to support that?
Sure. So That is a world that Make Love Not Porn and MakeLoveNotPorn.academy are building. Because first of all, Make Love Not Porn will have triumphed in 2035 by being where you see how the world really makes love. And the important thing about that, Collette, is at Make Love Not Porn, what you see is the great real world sex that all of us really want to have. The loving, the connection, the intimacy, radiates through the screen. And then for 0 to 18 and beyond, that is the world that MakeLoveNotPorn.academy is going to build. Because there are a number of completely unique things about Make Love Not Porn Academy that are also why investors should be falling over themselves to fund it. The first is, we are designing the academy so that children and young people can access sex education without parental teacher gatekeeping. And here's why that's important. I have a friend who's a mother, and as you have to these days, she monitors her kids' browsing history. So this happened a few years ago. Her son was 8 years old, and she saw, to her horror, on the family computer, he had Googled sex for children. So she freaked out, but did the right thing, stayed calm, sat him down. Darling, I have to see, talk you through why. This anecdote is adorable and horrifying in equal measure, because her son would learn about sex. He was a child. He knew he was a child. He would learn about sex in a child-appropriate way. He sweetly, innocently Googled sex for children. You can imagine the kind of thing that came back utterly traumatized. And so we have designed the academy so that an 8-year-old boy can enter his age on the homepage, or a parent can enter it for him. We will only serve him age-appropriate sex education content.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The second thing that is unique about what we're doing at the academy is that we are making sure that for launch, we have the most cutting-edge education on there. And the reason I say that is because the pace of education has not kept up with the pace of technology and the societal evils that are resulting. And often, unfortunately, parents and teachers don't fully understand what their children really encounter online. So we have brilliant education on sex stalking, on intimate image abuse, on AI chatbot relationships, which are currently exploding exponentially amongst children and young people who are forming romantic and sexual relationships with AI chatbots are completely friction-free, feedback what they want to hear. So we have the most cutting-edge education easily available, easily findable on the academy. And then the third thing that is very unique about what we're doing is there is a reason that our name is Make Love, Not Porn, because we view and present everything through the lens of love. Make Love Not Porn as it currently exists is love in action. The academy will be education through love. And the reason I say that is because today children are growing up in a world where they are living as much through screens as they are IRL. They are communicating predominantly through screens, which means that IRL social interactions are awkward and anxiety-inducing. They are stumbling across porn at the age of 6. They are, as I said, forming AI chatbot relationships. What is getting lost in all of that is the IRL wonderfulness, joy, connection, friction, heartbreak, and when you're old enough, expression from sex of first love. I've been saying to parents for years, you must begin talking to your child about sex as early as possible. I've also said, you must begin talking about love as early as possible. Love is such a foundational construct in our society. We leave it to popular culture to define. We all need to be talking about love and what that really means, including IRL human connection, that is so much better than anything an AI chatbot can give you. And so, what is unique is how we are framing all of this. This is not just sex education. This is education about relationships, intimacy, dating, that are fundamental to all of our habits.
Absolutely. And I'm nodding vigorously because I'm the mother of an 18-year-old boy, turned 18 this summer. We started navigating it early on. And a lot of what you talked about at Ideas Fest actually I felt vindicated because I'd approached it slightly differently and done things differently. So thank you for that. I think what you talk about, even that statement, sex is communication. I wholeheartedly agree. So it's wonderful. Okay, so what would you tell another founder who's thinking about taking on like an industry that's actively discriminating against them?
I mean, first of all, I would say that is where the biggest opportunities are. An industry that is closed-minded and has therefore closed itself off does not see what the future could be. Yeah. Also, as I mentioned earlier about my own, it's actually great to operate in a very high barrier to entry sector. If you want to do something that the rest of the world frowns upon, that's great because you have no competition. So, and then, echoing a point I made earlier, about, finding the people who get it. It's no bad thing to have your investors and your business partners be self-selecting. At least when I get to talk to an investor, I know they really want to be there. I have founder friends, especially female founder friends, with more conventional businesses who've pitched and been rejected over 300 times. Honestly, as entrepreneurs, none of us needs any more thoroughly depressing meetings than we absolutely have to have. And so at least in my case, I know that when I'm having a conversation with somebody, they are open-minded enough to have the conversation. It may or may not go anywhere, but, I get to talk to self-selecting people, who do want to hear what I have to say. And so I would say to any founder, that is no bad thing. And by the way, that's also why I'm a great believer in another one of my personal philosophies is be your own filter. And my own personal example of that is what you alluded to at the start of this conversation, which is that, my LinkedIn bio says, I like to blow shit up. I'm the Michael Bay of business. And how that came about was many years ago, I was talking to some potential consultancy clients. I support myself by doing business consulting. By the way, listeners, if you like what I'm saying, you can hire me to consult. And so I was explaining that I consult very selectively, only for clients and brands who want to change the game in their particular sector. So you come to me for radical, innovative, groundbreaking, transformative. I don't do status quo. But I lightheartedly, off the cuff, went, I like to blow shit up. I am the Michael Bay of business. And everyone in the meeting laughed. And I left the room and I thought, actually, that is a really good way of summing up what I do. So I've been using that line ever since. But I use that line not as a bit of whimsy, creativity, a bit of fun. I use it entirely deliberately. Because when I characterize what I do in that way, I attract to me the people who want what I do. I repel the ones who don't. And I want to repel the ones who don't because they're a waste of time, effort, and money. So as I said, be your own filter. Sum up what you stand for, what you're all about, put it out there. You will attract your tribe to you and you will keep away the time wasters.
Yeah, very sage. Very sage. The final question from me is, we've talked a lot about what you've learned over the years. Is there anything that you've unlearned? Is there any beliefs or views on human nature or anything that you've just had to abandon over that time that springs to mind?
I think, what I would say the biggest lesson for me has been, and again, I think this may be useful to the business leaders, listening to us. The only person who can make things happen for you is you. And the reason I say that, Collette, is because, I, as a founder, as a business person, like all of us, I do a lot of networking, and I've talked to so many people over the years. And I now divide those people into two types. There are people who say, and there are people who do. And the people who say are very nice because they're big fans of what you're doing and they want to help and they, and they do absolutely nothing. I'm all about the people who do. And I also don't believe in relying on the people who do because there are way too few of them. And so, what I've learned is to be, and I wouldn't put this necessarily as cynical, more pragmatic about the fact that someone can talk a great game and nothing's going to result. And I think that's a very important business lesson because it makes you much more time and energy efficient. It's in the same way that because obviously as someone who's struggled to raise funding herself, I advocate for many more female founders to be funded. And my question to investors is always, are you the kind of investor that talks about funding female founders, or are you the kind that writes checks? Because I'm interested in the ones that write checks. Yeah. And so I've just learned to be much more discerning about, it's really lovely this person said all those nice things, but is any action going to result? No, that's fine. I know, and so I would encourage our listeners, the people you really want to focus on are not the people who say, but the people who do. And it's a good idea to try and establish very early on which is which, because that way you don't spin your wheels and you don't pin your hopes on and you don't focus too much on the people who say versus the people who do.
Again, great advice. Is there anything that you would like to say that I haven't asked about before we wrap up?
I think, for our listeners, if you like what I've talked about, please do support me by going to MakeLoveNotPorn.com and signing up and subscribing. Subscriptions start at $10 a month, very, very easy to support us. If you go to MakeLoveNotPorn.academy, you can enter your email and we will notify you when the academy launches. Also, just be aware that I'm happy to report that we now have a non-profit vehicle. We are able to take tax-deductible donations and philanthropic capital through a partnership with a wonderful non-profit called Inspire Access, who specialize in channeling, donations, donor-advised funds, foundation grants. As a non-profit, they can accept philanthropic capital and then pass it on to underrepresented founders with for-profit social impact ventures who otherwise struggle with funding, like me. So if you want to know more, Cindy at MakeLoveNotPorn.com, hit me up. And also, I will just say that I have a Substack called Dear Cindy, where I answer a question a week and I get many business questions. So, again, if you like what I've said and you want to ask me anything to do with business or life or, life in the universe and everything, check out Dear Cindy on Substack and do send me your questions.
Okay. Cindy, thank you so much for taking the time out today. I'm genuinely absolutely delighted to have been able to have the conversation with you. I'm incredibly grateful that you've made the time, and I just know that this will be a really interesting listen to our listeners. Thanks you.
Collette. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.